Crimson Shadow, the Dragon and the Taimanin. Act 4 The Correspondent's Shadow. Chapter 31 The Shape of the Investigation. 14 days after Issei's return, the investigation had a shape. It had been built the way Rias built everything that required patience, methodically and without announcement, each piece added to the structure only after it had been verified rather than assumed. She had convened no formal council session about the correspondent. She had made no dramatic pronouncement. She had simply, in the spaces between the ordinary business of her household and her territory, begun to ask the questions that needed to be asked in the ways that would not alert the person the questions were about. Akino had taken the lead on the social mapping. This was her particular competency, the ability to move through networks of people and relationships with the same grace she brought to every other kind of movement, noting connections and absences and the specific texture of how different people talked about different subjects without ever conveying that she was doing anything other than being herself. She produced, at the end of the first week, a diagram of contact patterns across the major supernatural factions in Kuoh that was both comprehensive and disturbing in its implications. The intelligence quality in the architect's records, she said, spreading the contact map across the clubroom table, requires someone who has had extended, repeated, and relatively unguarded interaction with members of multiple factions. Not just our household. Devil, fallen angel, and independent supernatural contacts. Someone who operates across faction lines, Rias said. Yes. And someone whose presence across those interactions would not be remarkable. Someone whose reason for being in multiple faction contexts is built into their established role. Kiba had been running the intelligence profile analysis in parallel, cross-referencing the specific knowledge revealed in the architect's records against what would have been knowable from different positions within Kuoh's supernatural landscape. Whoever this is, Kiba said from his seat at the left end of the table, has accurate information on our individual combat capabilities. Not general faction assessments. Individual detail. The kind that comes from direct observation of training or actual combat. Which narrows the pool significantly, Zenobia said. It narrows it, Kiba agreed. But it does not yet eliminate enough candidates. Issei had been listening from his position at the edge of the table, as he had been listening for 2 weeks, holding the dual role of the person with the most direct knowledge of the architect's records and the person with the most immediate stake in what the investigation found. The correspondent was operational for approximately 2 years, he said. The syndicate has been in operation for the same period. The intelligence gathering and the organization building started at the same time. Yes, Mizuki had said, in her initial analysis from the other side of the barrier. The memory of her voice through Drake's resonance channel was clear enough that Issei could hear the exact quality of it. Which means, he said to the table, that whoever the correspondent is, they were in position 2 years ago. They did not enter the Kuoh supernatural landscape after the syndicate started. They were already here. Rias looked at him with the particular attention she reserved for moments when a piece of the puzzle had found its correct orientation. That reduces the pool to people who were present in Kuoh's supernatural community at least 2 years ago, she said. Kiba. Already running it, Kiba said. While the investigation built its architecture, life in Kuoh proceeded with its characteristic combination of the ordinary and the extraordinary. Issei went to class. He sat through lectures on subjects that were, in the context of the past 3 weeks, even more surreal in their ordinariness than they had previously been. He ate lunch with Asia in the usual spot and let her gentle concern express itself through the quality of attention she gave to whether he had eaten enough and whether his ribs were healing properly. And he received both without deflection because Asia's concern was one of the things worth receiving without deflection. You are thinking about something far away, she said, on the 4th day of the 2nd week. I am always thinking about something, he said. Yes, she said. But usually the something is closer. This one is. She paused, looking for the word. Behind your eyes differently. He looked at her. Asia Argento, with her gold hair and her green eyes and her absolute uncomplicated warmth, was the person in his life who noticed the quality behind the eyes rather than the content of the eyes, and the noticing was never about analysis. It was about being present with him exactly where he was. There are people, he said carefully, in a different world. People I worked with, when the rift took me. People I would like to know better. But the world is far, she said. Currently, she repeated, And the way she said it was the way Asia always received future-oriented statements from Issei, with the complete confidence of someone who has watched him make the impossible happen enough times to treat it as a reliable operational category. "You will find a way," she said simply, and went back to her lunch. He sat with the warmth of that for a moment, the specific quality of being known by someone who knows you in the most fundamental rather than the most complex sense. The resonance letters he had sent through Drake's network were not answered in the form of words. That was not how the channel worked. But Drake reported, on the 16th day, that a resonance pattern had moved through the dimensional thinning in response to Issei's transmissions, and that the pattern carried characteristics that were specific enough to be identified. 3 distinct sources, Drake said, with the satisfaction of someone completing a difficult analytical task. The first is the chi signature I identify with the silver-haired one, Shizuru Kosaka. The second is the precise, controlled output characteristic of the woman called Rinko. The third is more complex, an analytical pattern rather than a combat signature, which is consistent with Mizuki Shiranui. They received the letters, and they responded. The responses are not translatable into language through this channel. But they are present. They are directed at your specific signature. And they are. Drake paused, which he did rarely and which always indicated something he was weighing carefully. Sustained. Not single transmissions. They are ongoing. Someone on that side has been maintaining a resonance directed at you since at least the 12th day. Issei sat with that. 12 days, he said. The pattern quality suggests continuous maintenance rather than periodic transmission. Someone has been doing this every day. He thought about Rinko Akiyama maintaining a deliberate, sustained resonance output every day for 12 days, with the same precision and commitment she brought to everything that she decided was worth doing. The image was not surprising. It was exactly consistent with who she was. He thought about Mizuki running an ongoing analytical pattern toward his location, building a data set of dimensional resonance characteristics that she would eventually use for something technical and precise. He thought about Shizuru, who had said when rather than if, and who had apparently decided that when was something worth actively building toward rather than passively waiting for. Send them back, he said. A sustained response. Daily. Until there is a better channel. Already doing it, Drake said. Chapter 32, Kurenai's Information. The message from Kurenai arrived on the 19th day, through a channel that Mizuki had apparently established before Issei left, a secondary resonance pathway that carried structured data rather than signature patterns, and which Tatsuru had spent the intervening time calibrating to a reliable enough state to transmit actual content. It was addressed to Issei and to Rias Gremory by name, which meant Mizuki had decided to communicate directly with his household, which was a significant strategic decision, and which Issei found he was not surprised by. He translated it with Drake over the course of an afternoon, sitting in the club room while the autumn light moved across the floor and the building settled into its after-school quiet. Ria sat across from him and read each section as he translated it, her expression doing the controlled processing work it did when the content required it. The message was from Kurenai, but it contained contributions from all 3 of them. He could identify whose sections were whose by the time he was halfway through the translation. Kurenai's sections had the characteristic calculating directness he remembered from the walk to the crossing site. Shizuru's sections were clear and precise and architecturally sound in their logic. Mizuki's sections were the densest, layered with reference data and analytical conclusions and, in the final paragraphs, the particular quality of observation that he had encountered in the second section of her physical document. The message contained 3 things. First, an update on the architect's detention and the processing of his records by the Taimanin Council, which had received the intelligence package with a reaction that Kurenai described as simultaneously alarmed and deeply reluctant to admit it had been alarmed. Second, an intelligence contribution to the correspondent investigation. Mizuki had run a parallel analysis of the architect's intelligence-gathering patterns and had identified a specific characteristic in the way the co-related intelligence was structured. It had been gathered by someone who was not themselves a faction member. The framing of the intelligence, the way certain things were described in terms of their observable rather than their experiential characteristics, was the framing of an outside observer rather than an insider. Not a member of any faction, Ria said, reading the translated section. Someone who interacts with faction members from a position that is adjacent rather than embedded. A neutral, Issei said. Or someone who presents as one. In Kuoh's supernatural landscape, Rias said slowly, the people who interact extensively with multiple factions from a neutral adjacent position. They looked at each other. The pool had just become considerably smaller. What is the third thing? Rias asked, looking at the remaining section of the translated message. Issei looked at it for a moment. The third section was Mizuki's alone, and it was not intelligence or operational content. It was something else. Personal, he said. Rias looked at him with the clear-eyed quality she brought to things that required both honesty and care. Then it is yours, she said, and stood up to give him the room, which was Rias being exactly who she was. He read it alone, with the afternoon light on the floor and Drake quiet in the background giving him the privacy of not commenting, and what Mizuki had written was precise and analytical in its structure and completely genuine in its content and said in careful, well-chosen language the things that someone who built walls of precision around important things says when they have decided the important thing is worth building a door for. He read it 3 times. Then he put it with the physical document she had given him before the crossing, in the careful place where things that need to be held correctly are held. Chapter 33, The Name. Kiba brought the name to Rias on the 22nd day. He brought it with the particular quality of someone who has confirmed a conclusion past the point of uncertainty before presenting it, not because he was protecting anyone but because he understood that the weight of the name required the weight of certainty to carry it correctly. The name was Valerio. He was not a devil and not a fallen angel and not an angel. He was an independent supernatural scholar, a category that existed in the margins of Kuoh's faction landscape and had existed there long enough that his presence was unremarkable, a fixture of the antiquarian and occult library networks that connected the various supernatural communities in the region. He was, by every visible indicator, exactly what he presented himself as. A collector of rare supernatural texts and a consultant on dimensional matters who had been operating in the Kuoh area for slightly more than 2 years. The slightly more than 2 years was the fact that had brought Kiba to the conclusion. He arrived in Kuoh approximately 6 weeks before the syndicate's first documented regional operation, Kiba said. His stated reason for presence is ongoing research into dimensional phenomena in the region, which is consistent with Kuoh's unusual supernatural concentration. His contact pattern across our household and the other Kuoh factions matches the intelligence profile in the architect's records with a precision that I have calculated at above 94% correspondence. 94%, Rias said. The remaining 6% is the margin of my analytical uncertainty, not exculpatory evidence, Kiba said. The correspondence improves the more contact pattern detail I include. Issei had been quiet during the presentation. He was doing the thing he had been doing for 22 days, holding the operational and the personal in separate honest compartments. And the operational compartment was currently noting that the person who had spent 2 years building a detailed picture of his household and his friends and the people he cared about was a man who had sat in supernatural library consultations and attended faction social events and smiled and asked careful, interested questions for 2 years. What is his current status? Issei asked. He is in Kuoh, Kiba said. His research residence is in the Old Quarter. He has no indication that he is under investigation. Good, Rias said. We keep it that way until we are ready to move. Move how? Zenobia asked. Zenovia's approach to problems of this category was, characteristically, oriented toward resolution rather than extended process. We do not know whether Valerio knows the cascade failed, Rias said. We do not know whether he has been in communication with the architect or whether that communication has been cut by the detention. We do not know what he does next if the architect's operation is confirmed failed from his perspective. She paused. We find out before we move. And then we move. I want to be in the conversation, Issei said. I know, Rias said. Not as a threat. As a participant. There is a chance that Valerio knows something about the dimensional mechanics that is relevant to the bridge project, and that chance is worth pursuing before we put him in a position where cooperation is the only remaining option. Rias considered this. You believe he might cooperate voluntarily? I believe the architect cooperated voluntarily when the conversation was honest, Issei said. I believe the pattern is worth testing before we foreclose it. The room was quiet. Outside the window, Kuoh's afternoon continued its ordinary business. All right, Ria said. You are in the conversation. Chapter 34 Valerio. They met in the library. This was Issei's suggestion and Rias had approved it after a moment of consideration that was long enough to indicate she had weighed the alternatives seriously. The library of the old supernatural network quarter in Kuoh was neutral ground by long convention, the kind of space where information moved between factions under a tacit agreement of non-hostility that had been maintained for decades because everyone who used it understood that the alternative was worse. Valerio was already there when Issei arrived. He was a slight man of indeterminate apparent age with the kind of face that collected information without distributing it, and he was sitting at one of the reading tables with a text that he was not actually reading, which Issei knew because the text was open to the same page it had been on when Issei had surveilled the library entrance for 10 minutes before entering. He knew Issei was coming, which meant he had been told, or had inferred. The inference option was more likely, which meant he was as perceptive as the architect's intelligence records required him to be. Issei sat down across from him. Valerio closed the text. He looked at the boosted gear on Issei's left arm with the particular quality of someone who has been looking at the intelligence assessments of something for 2 years and is now looking at the actual thing. You came back, Valerio said. Yes. The cascade failed. Yes. The architect is in Taimanin custody. Yes. Valerio was quiet for a moment. He did not appear to be performing composure. The composure appeared to be genuine, the composure of someone who has spent a long time in situations where their continued presence depended on not having observable reactions to significant information. You are not here to arrest me, he said. Not immediately, Issei said. I am here because you have been studying this situation for 2 years and I have questions that you might be willing to answer. In exchange for what? In exchange for the honest version of what comes next rather than the adversarial version. Valerio looked at him with those collecting, non-distributing eyes. You are the Red Dragon Emperor, he said. You are supposed to be the most direct path to power in the known supernatural hierarchy. You are supposed to want leverage, not honesty. You have been building an intelligence picture of my household for 2 years, Issei said. You tell me if that assessment is accurate. A long pause. Valerio looked at the closed text in front of him. I did not know what the cascade would do, he said. The architect framed it as a stabilization project, creating controlled dimensional infrastructure where currently there is none. You believed him. I believed the technical framing, Valerio said. I did not examine the strategic implications closely enough. That was. He paused. An error I have been sitting with for some time. When did you understand what it actually was? Approximately 4 months ago. When the scale of the anchor infrastructure became clear and I ran the implications myself. 4 months ago, Issei said. And you continued to gather intelligence for the operation. I continued to be in a position where stopping was not straightforward, Valerio said. That is not an excuse. It is a description. No, Issei said. It is not an excuse. It is a human failure rather than a monstrous one. Valerio looked at him sharply. The phrase had clearly landed with the specific weight of recognition. The architect said something similar, Valerio said. About himself. I told him that, Issei said. I meant it for him and I mean it for you. Another silence. The library was quiet around them, the specific quiet of a place that holds accumulated knowledge in its atmosphere, the weight of everything that has been read and understood and argued over in its walls. What are your questions? Valerio said. They talked for 3 hours. Valerio's knowledge of dimensional mechanics was, as the intelligence from the architect's records had suggested, exceptional. He had studied the interaction between the 2 proximate universes for longer than the architect's operation had existed, and his understanding of the barrier's structure and behavior was both deeper and more nuanced than what the architect's engineering approach had required. He answered Issei's questions with the quality of someone who has decided that honesty is now the only viable strategy, and has made peace with that decision. Not every answer was comfortable. Several were direct acknowledgments of what the intelligence he had gathered was used for, and what he had understood about its use. He held those without deflection. The questions about the bridge were the ones that animated him in a way that nothing else did. A stable, permanent crossing pathway, he said, And the quality of his voice changed in the way that happens when someone is talking about something they genuinely care about rather than something they are performing care about. The architect was right that the principle is sound. The barrier between these two universes is not a wall. It is a membrane. Membranes can be maintained in a permeable state without catastrophic pressure events, if the permeability is managed correctly. Managed how? Not through a formation that creates artificial resonance. That was the error. Forced resonance requires continuous power input, and when that input fails, the collapse is uncontrolled. He looked at Issei with sudden focused attention. The correct approach is to find the natural resonance points. The places where the membrane is already thin, not because it has been stressed, but because the two universes' fundamental frequencies happen to be compatible at that location. Like the forest clearing, Issei said slowly. Where the rift deposited me. Where the crossing pathway opened. Exactly. That location is not thin because someone made it thin. It is a natural resonance point. The dimensional equivalent of a ford across a river. He paused. If you built the crossing infrastructure at the natural resonance points rather than forcing artificial resonance across the whole barrier, the pathway would be stable and self-maintaining. No power input required to sustain it. You would only need a power source to initially open the pathway. And the power source for the initial opening, Issei said? Something with the right frequency signature, Valerio said, and looked at the boosted gear. Which has already demonstrated that it can generate a compatible crossing frequency. Because it is, in terms of its fundamental energy signature, a cross-dimensional artifact. The original wielder existed in a different form of dimensional space from this world. Issei sat with this. Drake was very quiet in the background, the quiet of someone listening with complete attention. This is the bridge architecture, Issei said. Yes, Valerio said. And I have known it for 2 years. I spent those 2 years watching someone build the wrong version of it, for the wrong reasons, and being complicit in that through my own cowardice. He looked at Issei directly. If there is a version of what comes next where this knowledge is used correctly, I would like to be part of it. Issei thought about the architect in his cell, doing his objective retrospective analysis. He thought about Kurenai saying the right people will need to know each other. That is a decision that involves people who are not in this room, he said. On both sides of the barrier. I know, Valerio said. I will carry the proposal, Issei said. No promises about the outcome. No promises required, Valerio said. Honest engagement is sufficient. Issei stood. Valerio stood. They looked at each other across a library table with 2 years of complicated history between them and something that might be the beginning of a different kind of architecture on the other side of it. We will be in contact, Issei said. Yes, Valerio said. I believe we will. Chapter 35, 2 Worlds, 1 Table. Rias reviewed the transcript of the conversation with Valerio, which Kiba had recorded from his position at the library perimeter, the following morning. She read it once quickly, and then a second time slowly, the way she read things that required integration rather than simply information, and when she finished the second reading she set the transcript down and looked at Issei with the specific quality of attention she reserved for moments when the picture had changed in a way that required recalibration. Natural resonance points, she said. The forest clearing is one, Issei said. Valerio's research suggests there may be others. His mapping of the barrier's natural thinning points is the most comprehensive analysis of this specific question that exists in either world. In either world, Rias repeated. Mizuki has been running a parallel resonance mapping from the other side for the past 18 days, he said. Drake told me last week. Her analysis and Valerio's analysis, if they were compared directly, would give us a complete picture of every natural resonance point between the two universes, including the one stable enough to anchor a permanent pathway. You have been thinking about this for a while, Rias said. Since the crossing, he said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. The morning light was doing what morning light does in Kuoh in late autumn, coming in at an angle that made the familiar room look briefly like something being seen for the first time. What would it require, she said, not as a challenge but as a genuine operational question, to build the bridge correctly? The full scope. Valerio's natural resonance point mapping combined with Mizuki's analysis to identify the optimal location. A crossing infrastructure built at that location, in both worlds simultaneously, designed for the natural resonance frequency rather than an imposed one. A power source for the initial opening. And an agreement between the parties in both worlds about what the bridge is and who it serves. The agreement is the hardest part, Rias said. Yes, Issei said. The Taimanin Council will be resistant. Some of the Devil faction leadership will be resistant. Anything that changes the dimensional landscape requires agreement from people who are comfortable with the current landscape. People who are not the Council and not the faction leadership, Rias said, with the particular precision of someone who is simultaneously a faction leadership representative, and someone who has spent 2 years learning when the faction structure is the right tool and when it is the wrong one. People like us, Issei said. People like us, she agreed. She picked up the transcript again and looked at the section where Valerio had described the natural resonance point approach with the quality of someone talking about something they genuinely loved. Send Mizuki a message, she said. Through Drake's channel. Tell her we have Valerio's research, and we would like to compare it to her analysis. And tell her. She paused. Tell her that Rias Gremery, head of the Kuoh territory, is aware of everything and is in support. Issei looked at her. Rias, the people on the other side of the barrier need to know who they are working with, she said. Formally. If this is going to be built correctly, it starts with everyone at the table knowing everyone else. Thank you, he said. Stop thanking me for doing the obvious thing, she said, and the warmth under her authority was fully present. Send the message. Chapter 36. The Resonance Grows. Mizuki's response to the message about Valerio came in 4 days later, and it was the longest and most technically dense communication she had sent through Drake's channel since the crossing. She had been, she explained through the translated resonance patterns, conducting her own investigation of the barrier's natural resonance characteristics since the day after Issei had left. Not because she had been told to. Because the problem was interesting and because the data from the crossing pathway had given her enough parameters to build a proper analytical framework and because Mizuki Shiranui, when given an interesting problem and sufficient data, was physically incapable of leaving it alone. She had found 11 natural resonance points in the regional area of the barrier. Valerio had found 9. 7 of them were the same points. Cross-validation, Issei said, looking at the comparative map he had assembled from both analyses. Independent analyses from both sides of the barrier converging on the same 7 locations. Those 7 are the real ones. And among those 7, Kiba said, looking at the map over his shoulder, which one is optimal for the crossing infrastructure? Drake had an opinion. The clearing in the forest, the dragon said, with the certainty of something that had experienced the location directly. The natural resonance there is the strongest of the 7. It is also the most geometrically stable, which means the crossing infrastructure anchored there would be the least vulnerable to the kind of gradual frequency drift that can destabilize a maintained dimensional structure over time. The same location where I arrived, Issei said. And where the crossing pathway opened. Which is why those things happened there, Drake said. The location was not random. The architect chose the forest region for the formation because the natural resonance concentration in the area was the strongest in the broader regional barrier. He was working with the natural geography. The forest clearing is the center of it. Issei looked at the 7 points on the map and thought about a forest at night, and 2 blades at his throat, and the beginning of something that had not yet finished beginning. The forest clearing. Of course it was the forest clearing. He sent the comparative analysis back to Mizuki with Drake's assessment of the optimal location, and her response came faster than any previous communication through the channel, which was its own kind of information about her state when she received it. She confirmed the assessment. She had additional data on the clearing's resonance stability that reinforced Drake's conclusion. She indicated through the structured patterns of the transmission, also spoken to Shizuru and Rinko about the analysis. Both of them had said the same thing being, in the translated resonance patterning that Drake interpreted for Issei with characteristic dryness, that they had known it would be that forest from the day Issei had walked back into it after the node operation, and that the only question had been how long it would take everyone else to arrive at the same conclusion. That is, Drake said, extremely characteristic of both of them. Yes, Issei said, and the warmth in his voice was something he did not try to manage. Chapter 37. What Kurenai Built. The message from Kurenai that arrived on the 31st day was different in character from the previous communications. It was not analytical. It was not operational. It was, in the specific way that Kurenai communicated when she had decided a thing was worth communicating directly, an update on the state of the field. The Taimanin Council had reviewed the full intelligence package from the architect's records and had, after significant internal debate, issued a formal classification of the syndicate as a primary level threat and a formal commendation of the unit that had disrupted the Cascade operation. This was the institutional language for something that had, in the actual living of it, been 4 days of running through dark forests and fighting in cave chambers at 3 in the morning, and the distance between the two versions was characteristic of the distance between institutions and the people who do the work those institutions are responsible for. The architect's detention had been formally transferred to the Taimanin Council's handling, which meant the intelligence processing would continue at an institutional rather than unit level. Kurenai noted this with the tone of someone recording a fact they have mixed feelings about but are not going to complicate. The unit, she wrote, had been assigned new operational territory and was currently conducting a comprehensive sweep of the regional area for any remaining syndicate infrastructure. Ingrid and Koga had been offered permanent assignment to the unit, and had accepted. Tatsuru had been promoted in the loose hierarchical sense that Taimanin units used to indicate expanded responsibility rather than change title. And then, at the end, in a section that was separate from the operational update in the way that Kurenai's personal communications were always clearly distinguished from her professional ones, she wrote about the forest clearing. She had been to it since Issei's departure. She had gone twice, she wrote, at different times of day, and she had confirmed with her own chi sensitivity what Mizuki's analysis had quantified, that the location had a quality that was not reducible to its dimensional mechanics. That there was something at the intersection of the natural resonance point, and the events that had taken place there, and the specific people who had been part of those events that made the clearing different from a merely technically optimal location. She was not someone who said things she did not mean, she wrote. She was saying this because it was accurate, and because accuracy was always worth recording. She is endorsing the bridge project, Issei said, translating this for Rias. She is endorsing the location, Rias said. Which is the first structural commitment. Kurenai does not make commitments she does not intend to honor, Issei said. She is endorsing the project. Rias looked at the message carefully. She is also, I think, she said, telling you that the people in that forest are thinking about the clearing too. Yes, Issei said. She is. Chapter 38, 40 days. On the 40th day after his return, Issei went to the forest clearing alone. It was early morning, the kind of early that precedes full light, with mist on the ground and the forest doing its pre-dawn routine of small adjustments and quiet sounds. The clearing was exactly as it had been. The trees surrounding it. The specific quality of open space in the middle of the old growth. The ground that had held him when the rift deposited him without ceremony into a world he did not know. Boosted gear was active in its ambient sensing mode, and through it Issei could feel what Drake's analysis had described and what Valerio's research and Mizuki's data had all converged on. The natural resonance. The thinning of the barrier at this specific point, not because anything had done anything to it but because this was simply where the two universes happened to be close in the way that two bodies of water on either side of a low ridge are close, separated by geography rather than incompatibility. He sat down in the middle of the clearing, which he had not done since the first confused moments after the crossing, and let himself simply be present in it. Drake was quiet, respectfully so. The barrier was thin here, and on the other side of it, separated by the dimensional distance that was less at this location than anywhere else in the region, was a world with a different quality of light and a different quality of air and 3 specific people going about the specific business of their lives in the specific way that 3 people who have committed to something continue to go about their lives while carrying the commitment. He reached out with boosted gear at its lowest, most sensitive setting, not to cross, not to transmit, just to listen. He could not hear them. The barrier was thin, but it was not transparent, not yet, not without the infrastructure that would need to be built. But there was something in the quality of the resonance at this location that was different from anywhere else he had tested it, a warmth in the frequency that was not a technical artifact but was something else, the specific quality of a place that has been the site of genuine events involving genuine people. 40 days. He thought about Shizuru's saying when rather than if, about Rinko's certainty in the crossing site departure, about Mizuki's ongoing resonance pattern maintained for 12 consecutive days before it became a sustained dialogue through DxD's channel. About Kurenai in the clearing, twice, at different times of day, recording its quality accurately because accuracy was always worth recording. He thought about Valerio's bridge architecture and the 7 natural resonance points, and the specific information that 2 independent analyses from both sides of the barrier had converged on the same answer about where the infrastructure should be built. He thought about Ria saying the things that matter to you matter to me, and Asia saying you will find a way, and Kaneko saying you came back more, not worse. He sat in the clearing for an hour. Then he stood up, and activated boosted gear to a deliberate sustained output, not the explosive power of combat but the steady, resonant hum of something being built rather than something being used against an opponent, and he sent a signal into the barrier at the natural resonance frequency that DxD had calibrated specifically for this location. Not a message. Not a request. A foundation. The beginning of the infrastructure that would eventually, when built correctly on both sides with the people who needed to be part of it, become the thing that made after into now. The barrier accepted the frequency the way water accepts a stone, with a ripple that moved outward and then settled, changing the resonance of the location very slightly but very permanently in the direction of stability rather than separation. That, DxD said, with the satisfied quality of something very ancient watching something begin that it has been waiting a long time to see begin, is a start. Yes, Issei said. A small start. All bridges start small, Issei said, and began the walk back to Kuoh. Act V. The Bridge Between Worlds. Chapter 39. The 60-Day Compact. On the 60th day after his return, Issei Hyoudou sat at a table in the Occult Research Club room with 6 people who were not members of the Occult Research Club. Rias had called it a working session rather than a council, or a summit, or anything that would have required the kind of institutional notification that either invites interference or demands outcomes before thinking is complete. A working session was just people in a room with a shared problem, which was what it was. Valerio was there. He had been in an intermediate status for 6 weeks, not free and not formally detained, operating under the tacit agreement that his ongoing cooperation with the dimensional mechanics research was the functional resolution of the question of what his position was. He brought the natural resonance mapping he had been building for 2 years, annotated now with the cross-validation from Mizuki's analysis that Issei had forwarded through DxD's channel. Sona Citri was there. Rias had brought her into the picture on the 45th day, with the kind of honesty that their long shared history made possible, telling her everything and watching her process it with the precise intelligence that made Sona one of the most genuinely capable people in Kuoh's supernatural landscape. Sona's response had been characteristically measured. She had asked 17 questions and then said that she would like to be part of whatever came next. The Citri household's involvement gave the project a second devil faction anchor, which was strategically significant, and which Rias had clearly anticipated when she made the decision to bring Sona in. Kiba represented the research and security perspective. Aquino was there because Aquino's particular combination of capabilities and relationships made her the most effective person for the interfaction communication work that the project would require. And Issei, with DxD active and present in the background of everything, was the technical bridge in the most literal sense, the person through whom the dimensional mechanics had to flow. The working session lasted 9 hours. What came out of it was not a plan. It was the architecture of a plan, the load-bearing structure on which a plan could be built, which was more important than a plan because plans change and architecture holds. The natural resonance point in the forest clearing was confirmed as the primary crossing site. The crossing infrastructure design was Valerio's, heavily annotated with Mizuki's input through Issei's translation work, and it called for a modest physical structure at the clearing on both sides of the barrier, nothing elaborate, something that served to anchor the natural resonance and stabilize it against the kind of gradual frequency drift that would otherwise require periodic intervention. The power source for the initial opening was Issei and DxD, which required the boosted gear to sustain a specific output profile for approximately 4 minutes, which was demanding but manageable. The agreement about what the bridge was and who it served was the long conversation. It took most of the 9 hours. It ended with something that Rias wrote down in careful, precise language and that everyone at the table read and confirmed. The bridge was a crossing point between two adjacent universes, managed jointly by parties from both sides, available for use by individuals whose presence in either world served legitimate purposes, operated on principles of mutual benefit and mutual respect, and administered by a council that had no faction allegiance but had representation from the communities on both sides that the bridge connected. Not a tollgate. A bridge. Valerio read the written agreement, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "This is what it should have been from the beginning." "Yes," Issei said. "Thank you," Valerio said, and the words were heavy in the specific way of someone who is carrying a long weight, and has just found somewhere to set part of it down. Chapter 40, Building Season. The construction took 3 weeks. Not because the physical structure was complicated, it was deliberately simple, a framework of materials that Valerio had identified as resonance-compatible, built into the natural geometry of the clearing in a way that enhanced the existing thin point without trying to force or widen it. But because building it correctly required coordination between both sides of the barrier simultaneously, which meant Issei spent 3 weeks as the most intensely active dimensional communication relay in the history of either universe. He stood in the clearing every morning for an hour, maintaining boosted gear at its sustained resonance output, while Drake coordinated the frequency calibration with the signals coming through from the other side. This was Mizuki's work on that end, and Issei could feel her analytical precision in the quality of the calibration signals she sent, the same meticulous accuracy he had experienced in her physical document, and in every communication since. Valerio supervised the physical construction in the clearing, moving around the framework with the focused attention of someone for whom this was the culmination of years of research finally being applied correctly. Kiba assisted with the structural work. Tatsuru had sent construction specifications through the resonance channel that matched Valerio's design with enough detail to make it clear that he had been thinking about this in parallel. On the other side of the barrier, Issei could not see what was being built, but Drake could feel it, the growing stability of the resonance point as the corresponding infrastructure took shape. The two structures being built simultaneously on either side of the barrier were, the dragon told him, already beginning to interact with each other through the natural thinning, reinforcing each other's resonance stability in a way that neither could achieve independently. They fit, Drake said on the 14th day, with the quality of something deeply satisfied. The structures? The structures. The frequencies. The overall design. A pause. Everything. Issei looked at the framework rising in the clearing, simple and clean and built for the natural resonance rather than against it, and he thought about something built correctly fitting everything around it in a way that forced construction never does. Yes, he said. It does. The working sessions continued in parallel with the construction. Sona had taken over the administrative architecture of the Bridge Council, which she approached with the organized thoroughness that she applied to everything from rating game strategy to student council proceedings, and the structure she was building was genuinely sound. Representation from both sides without faction dominance. Transparent operational protocols. A dispute resolution mechanism that had been Rias's contribution and which was elegant in the specific way that Rias's solutions were elegant, dealing with the real problem rather than the stated one. Aquino was managing the interfaction communication, which was the most delicate ongoing work. She had approached the key faction representatives in Kuoh's supernatural community with the information about the bridge project in a sequence that Rias had designed carefully, giving each party the context they needed to understand the project before asking for their position on it. The responses had ranged from enthusiastic to suspicious to the particular brand of bureaucratic resistance that comes from organizations that are comfortable with the current state of affairs. The suspicious and resistant responses were the ones that required the most nuanced handling, and Aquino handled them with the specific capability she had for managing complex emotional landscapes with precision and genuine care simultaneously. The Phoenix representative wants to know, she said to Issei one evening, with her characteristic smile that held everything lightly without dismissing any of it, whether the bridge would allow a Phoenix to visit the other world. Theoretically, Issei said. The Bridge Council agreement covers individual access for legitimate purposes. And a Phoenix's legitimate purpose? Would be between the Phoenix and the Bridge Council. I will convey that, she said. With appropriate diplomatic packaging. You are very good at diplomatic packaging, Issei said. I am very good at many things, she agreed, and her smile was the particular version it was when she was being genuine rather than performing. This one comes naturally. Chapter 41, Shizuru's Message. On the 78th day, a message came through Drake's channel that was unlike any of the previous transmissions. It was longer, more carefully structured. And it was from Shizuru alone, which meant she had composed it specifically rather than contributing to a group communication, which was a deliberate choice and carried the weight of deliberate choices. Issei translated it in the early morning before the construction session, sitting at the club room table with tea that Kaneko had left without being asked, because Kaneko had developed an accurate sense of when he was going to need tea and provided it preemptively. Shizuru wrote first about the operational state of the unit. The syndicate's regional infrastructure had been fully mapped and addressed. 3 additional installations, smaller than the primary facility, had been found and cleared. The regional barrier was stable and returning to full thickness except at the natural resonance points, which were if anything slightly more stable than they had been before the cascade attempt because the formation's disruption had released dimensional stress that had been accumulating for decades. She wrote about Rinko, not personally but in the way of someone recording the operational context of a colleague, which carried its own kind of personal content if you knew how to read it. Rinko had been leading the installation clearance operations. She was excellent at them, which was not surprising, and she had been conducting them with a specific quality of focused efficiency that the people who worked with her were interpreting as her characteristic mode but that Shizuru was interpreting, having known her much longer, as the focused efficiency of someone who is working hard because the work keeps them connected to a purpose. The purpose being not entirely contained within the clearing operations. Shizuru wrote about Mizuki, who had been in direct communication with Valerio through Issei's relay for 11 days and whose correspondence with the Dimensional Scholar had, according to Mizuki's reports to the unit, become one of the most technically productive research partnerships she had engaged in. The cross-universe academic collaboration was proceeding with a velocity that had already produced 3 significant insights into the bridge infrastructure design that neither of them had arrived at independently. And then Shizuru wrote the section that was not operational. She wrote about the clearing. She went there, she wrote, once a week. Not for operational reasons. Not to monitor the resonance, or to assess the construction progress from the signs she could detect through the natural thinning. She went because it was the location with the specific quality that Kurenai had described, the intersection of dimensional mechanics and genuine events and genuine people that made a place something other than its technical parameters. She went, she wrote, with the specific purpose of being in a place that was connected to something that she had decided mattered. She wrote that she had not been someone who spent much time in the last several years doing things with the specific purpose of being connected to something that she had decided mattered, as distinct from doing things with the purpose of completing an objective or fulfilling a responsibility. The distinction was one she had been considering since a corridor conversation with a person from another universe in the early morning hours after an operation. She wrote that she thought the distinction mattered. She wrote that she looked forward to discussing it in person. She wrote it with the precision of Shizuru Kosaka, which was the precision of someone who chooses every word with the full weight of her intelligence and her character behind it. And when someone like that says they look forward to something in person, they mean it in the complete sense of looking forward and in the complete sense of in person, and in the complete sense of everything those words imply about what in person will be like when it arrives. Issei sat with the message for a long time. The morning light moved across the floor. Boy, Drake said. Not now, Issei said. I was going to say you should drink your tea before it gets cold. Oh. He picked up the cup. Right. He drank the tea and held Shizuru's message in the careful place where important things are held and thought about the forest clearing with its morning light, and the structure being built in it, and the 89 days between 2 people in different universes, and a conversation that had been deferred to the right time, and was beginning to be the right time. Chapter 42, The Last Calibration. The structure in the clearing was complete on the 83rd day. It was not dramatic to look at. This had been deliberate. Valerio had argued from the beginning that the bridge's physical presence in the clearing should be unobtrusive, built into the clearing's existing geometry rather than imposed over it, and the result was a framework that a person could walk into the clearing and look at and understand was something, without immediately understanding what it was or registering it as the anchor point of an interdimensional crossing infrastructure, which was, as Issei noted to Rias, probably the correct profile for something that was going to exist in a forest clearing in a world that had preferred, for most of its history, not to think too carefully about the supernatural infrastructure operating in its background. Drake's assessment of the structure was technical and thorough and concluded with a single word that the dragon used very rarely: perfect. Not adequate, Issei said. Not sufficient. Perfect, Drake said. The resonance integration with the natural thinning point is exact. The frequency stability margin is the highest I have measured at any artificial resonance anchor in my experience. The design works because it is working with the location rather than doing something to it. A pause that had the quality of deep satisfaction. Valerio and Mizuki built something that deserves that word. Valerio, when Issei conveyed this assessment, went very still for a moment in the way of someone receiving something they had not expected and did not know how to hold gracefully. Then he said, "Tell the dragon I am honored." "He can hear you," Issei said. "The boosted gear is active." Valerio looked at the gauntlet. Then, in the direction of it, in the slight awkwardness of someone addressing something they cannot see, he said, "Thank you. For 7 years I watched the wrong version of this being built. Thank you for helping build the right one." Drake said, in the internal space that Valerio could not hear, "He is not wrong about the 7 years. That is a significant weight to carry." "He is carrying it," Issei said. "Yes. The carrying is its own kind of accountability." The last calibration happened the evening before the planned opening. It was Drake's work, running through the natural resonance frequency of the clearing one final time, matching it against the signal from the corresponding structure on the other side, confirming that the two halves of the bridge were in complete alignment. The signal from the other side was steady and clear and had a quality that Drake described as optimistic, which was not a word the dragon used in technical contexts, and which Issei understood as something other than a technical assessment. Rias was in the clearing for the calibration. She stood at the edge of the framework and watched the boosted gear's crimson light interact with the structure's resonance material, and said nothing for a long time. "Tomorrow," she said finally. "Tomorrow," Issei confirmed. "Are you ready?" He thought about the question seriously rather than answering it automatically, because it was Rias asking and she deserved the honest version. "Yes," he said. "And I have been ready for 83 days. The construction was the necessary part. The readiness has been constant." She looked at him with the warmth that lived under her authority like a second foundation. "I know," she said. "I wanted to hear you say it." "Why?" "Because in 2 years of extraordinary events," she said, "I have watched you become someone who knows the difference between readiness and impatience, between commitment and urgency. I wanted to confirm that what is true tomorrow is that difference, clearly, before it happens." He looked at her. "It is," he said. "Good," she said. And then, simply, with the warmth fully present and no management of it, "I am glad I know you, Issei." "Rias," he said. "Go rest," she said. "You need the output capacity tomorrow." He went, and the clearing held its natural resonance in the dark, steady and patient, and on the other side of the barrier the corresponding structure held its answering frequency, and the distance between them was, for the first time, not a distance that time and commitment could not close. Chapter 43, The Opening. The morning of the 84th day arrived with the particular quality of mornings that know they are significant. Issei stood in the center of the clearing with the framework surrounding him and the natural resonance of the thinning point flowing through everything and the boosted gear at full ready, not active yet, simply present, waiting for the moment. Everyone who needed to be present was present. Rias stood to his right, in the full composed authority of the household head who had made this possible through 6 months of patient, deliberate, unglamorous work. Beside her, Sona, whose administrative architecture would manage everything that came after. Kiba behind them both, covering the perimeter with the quiet attentiveness that was his characteristic mode. Akino to Issei's left, her chi sensitivity already engaged, monitoring the resonance interaction between the two structures with the quality she brought to everything that required genuine attention. Valerio was at the southern edge of the framework, his hands on the resonance material of the structure he had helped design, doing the final frequency checks he had been doing every morning for 3 weeks with the thoroughness of someone who does not leave the important things to assumption. Asia was there. She had asked, the previous evening, simply and directly, whether she could be present, and the asking had been so genuine and so free of any attempt to claim a position she had not earned that Issei had said yes without hesitation. She stood slightly back from the framework with her hands clasped and her green eyes wide with the particular quality of someone experiencing something extraordinary with their full attention. Kaneko was next to her, sitting on a large root at the clearing's edge, eating something, because Kaneko managed significant events the way she managed everything else, with undemonstrative presence and the specific form of attention that does not require performance. Zenobia was at the north perimeter, sword at her side, because Zenovia's relationship with significant events always involved being prepared for anything that might require a sword, and nobody had suggested she reconsider this. Ready, Valerio said. Ready, Drake said, in the interior space. Issei took a breath. Not a centering breath in the theatrical sense. A breath in the functional sense, filling his lungs with the forest air of his world, the specific quality of it, before he added the boosted gear's output to the clearing's resonance, and began the process that would make the clearing something it had never been before. He let the boosted gear go. The opening was not an explosion. It was not dramatic in the way that dimensional events had been dramatic in Issei's previous experience. The rift that had taken him from the school rooftop had been violent and sudden, a crack in the air and a grab and a disorientation. This was different in every way. The framework absorbed the boosted gear's output and directed it into the natural resonance of the thinning point with the precision of Valerio's design, and the thinning point responded the way a natural ford responds when the water level drops, not a forced crossing but a revealing of what was already there. The barrier going from thin to transparent at this specific location with a slowness that had nothing of violence in it, and everything of the inevitable. The light changed. Not in a catastrophic way. In the way that light changes when a window is opened, when the quality of air in a room shifts as a connection is established between inside and outside. The morning light of one world and the morning light of another world, separated by dimensional architecture but aligned at this one point in their natural frequencies, combined in the opening into something that was both and neither, and entirely its own quality. Aquino said very quietly, "Oh." It was the most expressive thing she had said all morning. The opening stabilized. Not a rift. Not a tear. A door. Framed by the structure that had been built for it, maintained by the natural resonance that had existed there longer than any human construction in either world, the crossing point was open and clear and stable, and it was, Issei could tell from the quality of the resonance flowing through boosted gear, going to stay that way. Hold the output for 90 more seconds, Drake said. Let the resonance lock fully before you reduce. Issei held. 90 seconds had a particular quality when you were sustaining a significant power output and simultaneously watching the air in a forest clearing become a doorway between universes. He was very aware of every second of them. Then Drake said, "Done?" He reduced the output slowly, carefully, and the opening held. The framework held it. The natural resonance held it. The door was open. Issei lowered his arm. The clearing was quiet except for the forest sounds and the soft hum of the opening's maintained resonance, which was the quietest significant sound he had ever heard. And through the opening, on the other side, clearly visible in the corresponding morning light of the other world, was the forest clearing that he had landed in 84 days ago, when something had grabbed him without his consent and deposited him into someone else's world. The same trees. The same rock formation to the east. The same open ground. And standing in that clearing, on the other side of the door that had just been opened, were 3 people. Chapter 44, The Other Side. Shizuru Kosaka was standing at the front of the 3, which was characteristic. She was in her standard operational attire, which was also characteristic, and she was holding nothing because nothing was currently a threat, and her silver-streaked hair caught the morning light of her world in a way that was different from but parallel to the morning light of this world, and her eyes, even at crossing distance, had that absolute clear quality that Issei had stored in his memory for 84 days and was now looking at directly. Rinko was to her right. She was doing the thing she did in every moment that was not operationally demanding, which was existing in the terrain with the complete naturalness of someone for whom every environment is simply the current environment, to be inhabited with full presence and no unnecessary adjustment. She was looking at the opening with an expression that Issei could not read from this distance, but which the accumulated knowledge of 4 days and 84 days of careful attention told him was the expression she wore when something she had been precise about turned out to be exactly as precise as she had been about it. Mizuki was slightly behind them both, which was also characteristic, because Mizuki's natural position in any significant moment was the one that gave her the best angle of observation. She had a tablet in her hands. Of course she had a tablet in her hands. She was recording the resonance data from the opening in real time, because Mizuki Shiranui in the presence of an unprecedented dimensional event did not stop doing science, and the thought of it made something in Issei's chest do something that was not describable in tactical terms. Behind the three of them, farther back in the clearing, Issei could see Tatsuru at a monitoring station and Kurenai standing at the northern perimeter and Ingrid and Koga at the east, all of them in positions that said the other side had prepared for this with the same thoroughness as this side. Shizuru looked through the opening at Issei for a moment that had a particular quality, the quality of 2 points that have been separated by distance and time and a dimensional barrier confirming that the distance and the time and the barrier have not changed what was true about the 2 points. Then she stepped through. The crossing from the other side was as smooth as the opening had been. The framework accepted her passage the way it had been designed to accept it, naturally, without cost, without the wrenching dimensional transition that characterized unengineered barrier crossings. She stepped through the door, and she was in this world's clearing, and the light changed around her the way light changes around things that are simply in a different place, not catastrophically but completely. Rinko followed. Then Mizuki, who came through still looking at her tablet and stepped fully into the other world before she lowered the tablet and looked up with those warm, precise eyes and took in the clearing and the people in it, and the specific quality of the morning of a world she had never been in before. And her expression was the expression of someone for whom the actual experience of a thing they have been analyzing mathematically for months is both confirmation and something that the mathematics had not fully captured. The light is different, she said. Not as a complaint. As an observation. As the first data point. It is a different world, Issei said. Yes. She looked up from the tablet fully. It is. Shizuru and Issei were standing approximately 3 meters apart, which was the distance they had been standing at when she had lowered the blade from his throat 88 days ago, and the distance had the same quality it had had then of being exactly the right distance for the moment before it closed. You built it, she said. We built it, he said. All of us. She looked at the framework, at the clearing, at the light. Then she looked at Ryusuke, who was standing to Issei's right with the composed authority of someone meeting a significant person for the first time and doing it correctly. Ryusuke, Shizuru said. It was not a question, and it was not a greeting in the usual sense. It was an acknowledgement of the scale of what the other person had contributed. Shizuru Kosaka, Ryus said, with the same quality. I have read everything Issei has shared about you. I am glad you are here. As am I, Shizuru said. And the two women looked at each other with the specific quality of people meeting who have both contributed to the same significant thing and are now, for the first time, doing so in the same physical space, and what passed between them in that look was not competition or assessment but recognition. Chapter 45, 2 Clearings, 1 Morning. What followed was not the dramatic resolution of a significant event. It was people meeting each other. This was not a lesser thing. In Issei's experience, the most important moments rarely announced themselves in proportion to their importance. The moments that changed the shape of what was true were usually ordinary in their texture, people standing in clearings and talking and learning each other's names and finding that the person in front of them was a person in the complete sense, with their own history, and their own capabilities, and their own particular way of being in the world that was worth understanding. Akino met Mizuki. They found each other almost immediately, drawn by the complementary quality of their respective forms of attention, and within 15 minutes they were in a conversation about the dimensional resonance data that had the velocity of two minds recognizing that the other is operating at a compatible register, and Issei, watching them from across the clearing, thought that this was a friendship that was going to be significant for both of them in ways that would take some time to fully understand. Kiba met Rinko. This meeting was quieter, two people who expressed themselves primarily through what they did rather than what they said, finding each other in the edge space of the clearing where either of them needed to be for any operational reason, which was itself a kind of communication. They exchanged perhaps 40 words in the first half hour, and the quality of those 40 words was the quality of two people who have recognized something familiar and are taking the time to confirm that the recognition is accurate. Kaneko met Tatsuru, who had come through the opening after the initial crossing to confirm the structural integrity of the passage from the other side, and Tatsuru made the tactical error of offering Kaneko a snack from his supply kit without knowing Kaneko's specific relationship with snacks, and the resulting conversation was the loudest and most immediately friendly interaction of the entire morning. Valerio found his way to a corner of the clearing where he stood quietly for a long time, holding the specific weight of someone who has done something wrong, and has been given the opportunity to do something right, and is standing in the evidence that the right thing is real. Kurenai crossed through the opening 20 minutes after the initial group, because Kurenai's approach to significant thresholds was always to let others go first, and then assess the actual state of things before committing her own position. She looked at the clearing of this world with those calculating eyes and then looked at Issei and gave him the fractional nod that he had learned was her version of high praise. The Bridge Council should convene here, she said. In this clearing? With representation from both sides. The first session. I agree, Rias said from 3 meters away, because Rias had excellent hearing. Kurenai looked at her. Something passed between them that had the quality of two people who lead things recognizing each other's quality of leadership, which is its own category of recognition. Tomorrow, Kurenai said. Tomorrow, Rias agreed. Issei and Rinko found a space at the edge of the clearing, in the shadow of the old-growth trees, while the organized complexity of two worlds meeting for the first time processed itself in the open ground behind them. She was standing the way she always stood, with the complete physical presence of someone who is fully occupying the space they are in without requiring that space to do anything for them. The light of this world was different from her worlds, and she had noted it with the same quality of accurate observation she applied to everything, and she was now simply in it, inhabiting it the way she inhabited all terrain. Different, she said. The world? The world. The air. The specific quality of the light at this angle. She looked at the trees. The same trees but different. Like the same word in a different language that means the same thing but sounds completely unlike itself. That is, Issei said, an unusually poetic observation for someone who told me once that speaking precisely was more accurate than speaking approximately. Precision can include poetic observation, she said. If the poetic observation is accurate. Is it? Yes. She looked at him. The same but different. That is the most accurate description I have. He held her gaze, this person he had known for 4 intense days and 84 careful days and who was standing in his world for the first time with the same completeness of presence she had brought to every moment, since a forest in the dark when she had held a blade at his throat as the opening position. The conversation we deferred, he said. Yes. The full version. The one with time and space for it. Yes. This is not the time or the space for it, he said. There is a Bridge Council to convene tomorrow, and 2 worlds full of people in this clearing. No, she agreed. It is not. But it is the beginning of the time and the space, he said. Rinko was quiet for a moment. The forest of his world was doing its morning routine around them, entirely indifferent to the dimensional significance of what had just happened in its clearing, which was appropriate. Forests were not required to take note of the human things that happened in them. Yes, she said finally. And the word was the same certainty it had been on the crossing site. Not if but when, not someday but here, not theoretical but this. Good, he said. She looked at the clearing behind them, at the organized complexity of 2 worlds meeting, at Mizuki and Akino deep in their conversation and Kiba and Kurenai exchanging professional assessments, and Rias and Shizuru at the edge of the framework talking with the quality of 2 people laying the foundation of something that will matter for a long time. Your world, she said, taking it in with those precise eyes. Yes. Tell me about it, she said. So he did. Chapter 46, Mizuki in the Morning. Mizuki Shiranui spent the first 2 hours in this world moving through it with the systematic attention of someone conducting a field survey. She took resonance readings at 7 points around the clearing's perimeter. She examined the framework from every angle, confirming the structural choices against her own design contributions with the thoroughness of someone who needs to see that the built thing matches the specified thing before she can set down the comparison. She spoke to Valerio for 45 minutes about the specific resonance behavior of the opening event, which Valerio had been on site to observe and which complemented her remote data with direct observational detail. And then, when the systematic work was complete, and the data was logged and the technical picture was as fully constructed as the morning's events had made possible, she found Issei. He was at the northern edge of the clearing, taking a brief break from the organized complexity of two worlds meeting, holding a cup of tea that Asia had produced from somewhere with her characteristic anticipatory generosity. Mizuki sat down beside him on the large route that Kaneko had claimed earlier, which Kaneko had vacated to go investigate the food situation with Tatsuru. They sat without speaking for a moment, which was not uncomfortable. In the space of the past 3 months and all the communication that had moved through Drake's channel and the physical document she had given him and the messages that had become a sustained dialogue, Mizuki and Issei had developed the particular comfort of two people who have said important things to each other, and do not require the importance to be constantly re-performed. The second section, Issei said. Yes. I read it 17 times, he said. Mizuki looked at him. Her expression had the quality it had when she was receiving information that she had predicted and is confirming the prediction with the particular satisfaction of accurate forecasting. The technical section is not worth 17 readings, she said. No, he agreed. The second section, she said, was written in one sitting. I do not revise when I write things in one sitting. I write them in one sitting because they need to be written in one sitting, without the interference of revision. The revision process removes accuracy by introducing management. I know, he said. I could tell that it was written that way. That is part of what made it what it was. She was quiet. Mizuki, he said. Yes. Thank you. For writing it. For giving it to me as something physical. For the 18 days of resonance maintenance before the channel was reliable. For the parallel resonance mapping that identified the forest clearing independently, and confirmed that the architect's formation was built around the wrong principle. For the construction calibration signals every morning for 3 weeks. He paused. For all of it. For everything that required sustained, careful, intelligent effort applied to a purpose that was not your job and not your responsibility, and was entirely your choice. Mizuki looked at the clearing, at the opening that held itself in the framework with the quiet stability of a thing that is operating correctly, at the forest of a world she had never been in before that was doing the ordinary business of a forest morning while two supernatural communities stood in one of its clearings and looked at each other across the longest distance they had ever crossed. I find, she said, with the careful precision of someone choosing every word and meaning all of them, that certain things, when encountered, rearrange the priorities one operates under. Quietly but completely. So that what was not a responsibility becomes the thing the other responsibilities are organized around. Yes, Issei said. That is accurate. I know, she said. I wrote it down to confirm it. He looked at her, this person who processed the world through careful observation and rigorous analysis, and who had been, in the spaces between the technical work and the resonance calibrations and the research partnership with Valerio, doing something that her analytical frameworks did not have standard notation for and had proceeded without notation because it did not require notation to be real. This world, he said. Will you tell me what you think of it? I have been forming an impression since I stepped through, she said. Give me until this afternoon, and I will have a preliminary assessment. I look forward to it, he said. She almost smiled. So do I, she said. Chapter 47, What Shizuru Said to Rias. Rias and Shizuru talked for 2 hours at the edge of the clearing's framework, while the bridge opening events organized themselves in the open ground around them. Issei did not hear most of the conversation. He was present for parts of it, drifting in and out as the morning's requirements moved him, but the core of it was between the two of them, and the quality of it from the outside was the quality of two people who lead things and understand the responsibility of leading things, exchanging the specific information that people in that position exchange when they trust each other enough to be honest about the weight of it. He heard the section about the bridge council structure. Shizuru had reviewed Sona's framework through the communications that Akino had been conducting, and her assessment of it was thorough and positive, with specific suggested modifications that she delivered with the directness he had come to expect from her, not softened by the fact that she was a guest in this world but also not sharpened by any desire to assert a position. She simply offered the analysis because it was the relevant analysis. Rias received it with the quality she brought to genuinely useful feedback, the absorption of it into the existing structure with no defensiveness and immediate consideration of how it improved the whole. The modification to the dispute resolution mechanism, Rias said, reviewing Shizuru's suggestion. You are correct that the current draft has a gap in the multi-party scenario. It is a common oversight, Shizuru said. The bilateral cases tend to dominate the design consideration and the multi-party edge cases are underspecified. Sona will want to address it before the first council session. I would suggest addressing it with the Taimanin council representative as well. They will identify it independently, and it is better to have resolved it before the session than during. Agreed. And then the part of the conversation he heard later, when Rias reported it to him with the quality of someone conveying something they have decided he should know. Shizuru had asked Rias, at some point in the 2 hours, about Issei. Not what Rias thought of the bridge project, or what she thought of the operational competence he had demonstrated, or what his position in the supernatural hierarchy was. Those were all things Shizuru had access to through the architect's records and the subsequent communications. She asked about him, and Rias, who had said in the club room that the things that mattered to him mattered to her, had answered with the honesty and the care of someone who knows a person well and describes them accurately because they deserve to be described accurately. She had told Shizuru about the boy he had been when she met him, about the person he was becoming and the specific quality of the becoming, that it was not performance, and not ambition, but was the natural process of someone engaging fully and honestly with the world they were in. She told her about the particular quality of his loyalty, which was not obligation but was genuine and therefore did not erode under difficulty. She told her about his tendency to stand in front of things so other people did not have to, and about the 45 seconds that Shizuru would understand the weight of better than most people could. She told her, Rias said, reporting this to Issei with those clear crimson eyes, that he was the kind of person who makes the people around him more themselves rather than less. Issei sat with that for a long time after Rias said it. What did Shizuru say? He asked. She said Rias told him that she had inferred as much from the operational record, but that it was good to have it confirmed. He sat with that too. Rias, he said. You are going to thank me again, she said. Yes. Stop, she said kindly. Just know that I meant it. I know, he said. Chapter 48, The First Council. The Bridge Council convened the following morning in the clearing. Both sides of the bridge were represented. On the Kuoh side, Rias and Sona as the territorial devil faction representatives, Akino as the council's communication coordinator, Valerio as the dimensional mechanics specialist, and Issei as the bridge's technical anchor and founding contributor. On the Taimanin side, Shizuru as the unit commander who had been on site from the beginning, Mizuki as the research and intelligence representative, Kurinai as the independent operations advisor, and Tatsuru managing the documentation and communications infrastructure. The council chamber was the clearing itself, chairs arranged in a circle with the opening at one end and the old-growth forest at the other, the morning light of two worlds visible simultaneously through the crossing point. It was not a formal session. This had been Issei's suggestion and everyone had agreed with it, because the first meeting of the Bridge Council was not the place for formal parliamentary procedure. It was the place for the people who had built the thing to sit together and confirm that they understood what they had built and what they wanted it to be. Sona opened by reading the Council's founding agreement, slowly and precisely, the way she read all important documents, giving every section the weight it had been written with. When she finished, she looked around the circle. Does anyone require changes to any section before the agreement is formalized? Shizuru's suggested modification to the dispute resolution mechanism had been incorporated the previous evening. There were no further requests for changes. The agreement was formalized. The Bridge Council is in operation, Sona said, and the words were simple and administrative and carried the weight of what they meant, which was not simple at all. Around the circle, 12 people who had come from 2 different worlds through the specific accident and deliberate work of the past 85 days looked at each other and held the same understanding at the same moment, which is something that happens rarely and which is worth noting when it happens. Kurenai broke the silence. Now, she said, the actual work begins? It does, Shizuru said. We should discuss the operational protocols for the first 6 months, Mizuki said, and produced the tablet, and the session moved from its founding moment into the ongoing project of being an organization that does things rather than an organization that has been declared. Issei sat in his chair in the circle with the morning light of both worlds present, and the opening holding its quiet resonance, and 12 people around him who had all, through different paths and different contributions, arrived at the same clearing on the same morning to sit in a circle and decide what came next. He thought about a school rooftop and a violet crack in the air, and the worst navigation decision of his life that had turned out to be the best one. He thought about 2 blades at his throat as the opening position. He thought about 45 seconds. He thought about a corridor in an underground base in the small hours of the morning and tea shared in the specific quiet of people who have finished one hard thing and are preparing for the next one. He thought about the weight of a physical document against his chest on the crossing day, and a sustained resonance pattern maintained for 12 consecutive days by someone who did things because they were worth doing. He thought about Drag, ancient and vast and present, who had called this a start on the 40th day in this clearing when Issei had laid the first frequency foundation, and who was now very quiet in the background of the boosted gear, the quiet of something that has been waiting for a specific thing to begin, and has watched it begin. Boy, Drag said. Yes. Pay attention, the dragon said. The agenda item Mizuki is presenting concerns the crossing protocol specifications. You need to be paying attention. I am paying attention, Issei said. You are sitting in your chair looking at the light, Drag said. I can do both, Issei said. The dragon made a sound that was not agreement but was not disagreement either. Yes, it said after a moment. I suppose you can. Chapter 49. What the Forest Knew. After the first council session, after the operational protocols had been established, and the communication schedules agreed and the 6-month review framework set, and everyone had eaten the lunch that Asia and Tatsuru had produced between them with the particular synergy of 2 people who both love feeding people and had discovered this about each other approximately 40 minutes into the morning, the clearing gradually quieted. The Taimanin delegation returned through the opening to their world for the first official return crossing, which went as smoothly as the opening had, the bridge functioning exactly as designed. Tatsuru confirmed the structural readings from both sides. The opening remained stable after the crossing. The framework held. Only Shizuru and Rinko remained, by arrangement, to spend the day in this world. This had also been Issei's suggestion and Rias had supported it, and Shizuru had accepted it with the quality she brought to offers that were genuinely made, either deflecting from it out of formality nor accepting it out of obligation but simply taking it as what it was. Rinko had asked, with her characteristic directness, whether the offer included the entire Kuoh area or primarily the clearing. The entire area, Issei had said. I would like to show you both where I live. Yes, Rinko had said. Yes, Shizuru had said. So the afternoon found the 5 of them walking out of the forest and into Kuoh. Issei and Rias at the front of the group doing the informal guide work of people showing something they know well to people seeing it for the first time, and Shizuru and Rinko walking slightly behind with the quality of 2 experienced field operatives automatically assessing an unfamiliar environment. Kuoh was doing what Kuoh always did, which was existing as a perfectly ordinary Japanese town on its surface while being, several layers beneath that surface, one of the most supernaturally concentrated locations in the country. The supernatural content was not visible to ordinary perception, but to supernatural sensitives it was present in the ambient quality of the air and the specific weight of the territory markings and the particular way that the town had organized itself around the presence of something that was both power and protection. Shizuru felt all of it. Issei could tell because she was doing the assessment thing, the professional cataloging of environmental data that was her characteristic mode in new terrain. And the assessment had a quality of surprise in it that was small but genuine, the surprise of someone who has read the intelligence briefings and still found the reality different from the briefing in a way that matters. The territory is layered, she said. I expected a concentration. I did not expect the specific quality of the layering. 2 households, Rias said. Mine and Sona's. The layering is where their boundaries interact. It feels like, Shizuru paused, searching for the word, maintained. Not just present but maintained. Actively tended. It is, Rias said, with a quality in her voice that was the warmth she had for the things she had built, and continued to build. That is the work. Rinko had stopped in front of a bakery window. This was not operationally motivated. She was looking at the display of ordinary pastries with the particular quality of someone who has been in the field long enough that ordinary bakery windows carry a specific resonance. Can we? She said. Yes, Issei said, immediately. They went in. The bakery owner, who had been operating in the peripheral awareness of Kuoh's supernatural landscape for 15 years without ever requiring any specific knowledge of it, served 2 Taimanin warriors from a different universe exactly the same way he served everyone else, with the specific quality of professional warmth that good bakery owners have, and this was, Issei thought, one of the best things about Kuoh's particular relationship with its supernatural undercurrent. It was possible to be fully in the ordinary world and the extraordinary one simultaneously, without either canceling the other out. Rinko ate her pastry on the street outside the bakery with the same complete, present quality she brought to everything. Different from ours, she said. Better or worse? Different, she said. That is sufficient. He walked beside her through the ordinary afternoon of his ordinary town, and the afternoon was warm and the light was the specific gold of late autumn in this latitude, and she was in it completely, inhabiting this world the way she inhabited all terrain, with full presence, and no unnecessary adjustment, and he thought that the word different, delivered with Rinko's precision, was one of the best words he had heard anyone say in 85 days. Chapter 50. The Shape of What Was Built. The evening of the 85th day, when the light had gone amber, and the ordinary business of Kuoh was settling into its evening version of itself, found 4 people on the roof of the Occult Research Club building. This was Issei's rooftop. The same rooftop from which he had been standing when the violet rift had grabbed him. The same rooftop where 85 days ago he had watched a crack of impossible light open in the perfectly ordinary air and had, characteristically, stepped toward it instead of away from it. He had not stood on the rooftop since his return. He had been aware of this and had been waiting, without consciously planning to wait, for the right time to return to it. Shizuru stood at the eastern edge, looking out at the town below. The amber light was doing something particular to her silver-streaked hair, giving it a warmth that the cooler light of the forest clearing had not. She was still in the way she was always still, fully present, and she was looking at this world's evening skyline with those clear, deep eyes. Rinko was at the western edge, mirroring Shizuru's position with the unconscious physical coordination of 2 people who have worked together long enough that their spatial relationships are calibrated to each other. She was looking at the street below with the same qualities she had brought to the bakery window, the complete presence of someone inhabiting the current moment without reservation. Rias had gone inside, with the specific kind of tact that she deployed when she understood that a space needed to be a particular size to hold what it needed to hold. Issei stood in the center of the roof, approximately where he had been standing on the day the rift opened, and he looked at the 2 women at its edges and thought about the shape of what had been built. It was not a simple shape. Nothing built in 4 days of crisis and 85 days of deliberate, patient work across a dimensional barrier was simple. It had the complexity of things that are real, the asymmetries and the ongoing incompleteness and the places where the future had not yet been filled in. It had the weight of genuine commitment, and the particular quality of trust that forms between people who have shown each other what they are made of under conditions that require showing rather than telling. It had the 45 seconds in it, and the corridor T, and the physical document kept against the chest during a dimensional crossing, and 18 days of sustained resonance that nobody had asked for, and a walk through a town with a bakery window stop, and 2 women at the edges of a rooftop in amber light that was different from the light of their world. Shizuru turned from the eastern edge. She walked to the center of the rooftop and stood in front of Issei with the complete directness of Shizuru Kosaka, without performance, and without distance, And she looked at him with those silver-depth eyes that held what they held without concealment. The deferred conversation, she said. Yes, he said. This is the time, she said. And the space. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Not in the way of someone preparing something. In the way of someone arriving at a place they have been moving toward for a long time, and taking a moment to be in it before speaking from it. In a corridor, she said, on the morning after the formation fell, you asked me if what was built in 3 days was something I would want to know the full shape of. I said eventually. I said it the way you say things that you mean completely, but that belong to a time that has not arrived yet. Yes, he said. The time has arrived, she said. Yes, he said. Then yes, she said, precisely and completely and with everything that Shizuru brought to the word she chose. I want to know the full shape of it. I have been building toward knowing it for 85 days. I want the conversations and the specific quality of the trust that forms between people who have shown each other what they are made of and the particular way that you are with people that makes them more themselves. She held his gaze with the full weight of her clear-eyed directness. I want all of it. And I am saying it directly because speaking precisely about important things is not a limitation. He had told her that, in a corridor, 85 days ago. It is the opposite, he said. Yes, she said. The amber light was warm on the rooftop, and the town below was doing its evening business, and the world was doing what worlds do, which is proceeding with complete indifference to the human things that happen in its spaces while those things happen in it fully regardless. Rinko came in from the western edge. She came in with the same naturalness with which she moved through all terrain, and she stood beside Shizuru with the ease of two people who have spent years in proximity, and she looked at Issei with those dark, precise eyes. The full conversation, she said. We said after? It is after. It is after, he agreed. Good, she said, and the word had the same quality it always had from Rinko, neither demonstrative nor managed, simply accurate. Something was good, and she was naming it as good because naming things accurately was what she did. He looked at the two of them, Shizuru's clear directness and Rinko's precise completeness, and he thought about the shape of what had been built, and the fact that shape was still being built, and would continue to be built through the ongoing work of knowing people properly over time, and he thought that this was, in all the ways that mattered, exactly right. There is something else, he said. They both looked at him with the attentiveness of people who are always fully present. Mizuki, he said. A small quality passed between the two women, the particular communication of people who know each other very well. Yes, Shizuru said. Mizuki. She wrote something down, Issei said. That she had decided mattered. She built toward it with the same systematic precision she builds toward everything. She maintained a resonance for 18 days that nobody asked for. She designed a crossing infrastructure that Drake described as perfect. He paused. She is here because of the work. And she is here because of the other thing. Both are true and both are worth the same honest acknowledgement. She knows, Rinko said. That you understand both. I know she knows, Issei said. I want to say it anyway. Because saying important things directly is not a limitation. Shizuru almost smiled. And the almost smile had the quality of full arrival, the smile that has been practicing being almost itself for 85 days finally deciding to be itself completely. Go say it to her, she said. She is in the club room, Rinko said. She has been running a secondary resonance analysis since this afternoon. She will still be running it. Of course she will, Issei said. Go, Shizuru said. He went. Mizuki was exactly where Rinko had said she would be. She was at the clubroom table with her tablet and 3 screens worth of resonance data and the specific quality of absorption that meant she had been doing this for hours and would continue until the analysis was complete, the world around her present in her peripheral awareness but not requiring her primary attention. She looked up when Issei came in. The tablet went down. He sat down across from her, in the chair where he had sat for 2 years of important conversations and where he had translated 85 days of cross-dimensional communications, and he looked at Mizuki Shiranui across the table in the clubroom of his world with the ordinary lights on and the ordinary evening outside the window. I want to say something directly, he said. All right, she said. The second section was about something you had decided mattered, he said. And everything since has been you continuing to act on that decision with the full quality of your attention and your capability. The research and the bridge and the calibration work and all of it has been both things simultaneously, the work and the other thing has been as real as the work. Yes, she said. Simple. Present. I see it, he said. I want you to know I see it clearly, and I hold it correctly. The same way I hold Shizuru's directness and Rinko's precision. With the weight it deserves. Mizuki looked at him with those warm, analytically precise eyes that missed nothing and recorded everything and had been, for 85 days, recording him. I know, she said. I did not write 17 times readable things by accident. He smiled. It was not a managed smile. It was the smile of someone who has found someone whose particular way of being in the world creates a specific quality of warmth in you and is in the presence of that quality now. No, he said. You did not. She looked at the screens. Then at him. Then she picked up the tablet and held it for a moment with the quality of someone who is about to set down their primary tool for the evening. She set it down. Tell me about your world, she said. All of it. I have the resonance data. I want the other version. So he did, and the evening settled into the club room, warm and ordinary and extraordinary, and through the window the lights of Kuoh went on one by one in the specific way they always went on, familiar and complete, the shape of a place that was his and was now, in the way that places become part of people and people become part of places, more than only his. Chapter 51. The Bridge Holds. In the weeks that followed the opening, the bridge held. This was not a metaphor. The structural integrity of the crossing infrastructure remained exactly as Valerio and Mizuki had designed it, stable and self-maintaining, the natural resonance of the clearing doing the sustained work that an artificial formation would have required continuous power to accomplish. Drake checked the resonance readings every morning with the thoroughness of something that knows the difference between things that are holding and things that are about to fail, and every morning the readings were optimal. The Bridge Council convened twice monthly. The sessions were working sessions in the literal sense, dealing with the practical mechanics of a crossing point between two supernatural universes. The questions of access and protocol, and the ongoing negotiation of how two communities with different histories and different structures and different relationships to the concept of who counts as having legitimate purposes could build a shared framework that served both without subordinating either. It was not simple. Nothing genuinely useful is simple. But it was good work, done by people who were good at it, and the sessions had a quality of productive forward motion that distinguished them from the kind of institutional meetings that produced the appearance of progress rather than its substance. Mizuki attended every session. She had, by the third week after the opening, become the Bridge Council's de facto research and technical authority, a role that had not been formally designated but which had materialized through the simple mechanism of Mizuki Shiranui being the most comprehensively informed person on every technical question the council faced and providing that information with clarity and precision every time it was needed. Shizuru attended most sessions. When she could not, Rinko attended in her place, or they both attended together, and the sessions where both of them were present had a specific operational efficiency that the other council members began to notice and eventually to rely on, the quality of two people who think differently but complementarily arriving at the practical solution from their different directions simultaneously. Issei attended all sessions and was the bridge in the operational sense as well as the technical one, the person in the room with the most complete picture of both sides of the bridge and the relationships that connected them, and whose particular quality of being present with people in the way that made them more themselves meant that the sessions moved through difficulty without generating the kind of interpersonal friction that damages institutions in their early stages. Rias had said he made people more themselves. She had been right, as she was usually right about the things that mattered. The crossing became ordinary in the specific way that genuinely useful things become ordinary, not unremarkable, not stripped of its significance, but woven into the regular pattern of things in a way that said it was established, that it had passed the test of continued existence, that it was part of what was true about the world rather than a recent anomaly that might or might not persist. Mizuki crossed between worlds regularly, for research purposes and for council sessions and, increasingly, for the other version of the reasons that Issei had named directly in the club room and that she had not denied and did not need to deny. Her cross-universe academic work with Valerio had become one of the most significant research partnerships in dimensional mechanics either world had produced, and the work was good in the specific way of work that is done by two people who complement each other's approaches and are honest about the gaps in their own. Rinko crossed when the operational situation permitted, which was more often than it might have been for someone at her level of capability because Shizuru managed the unit's scheduling with the clear understanding that certain priorities were real and certain time was worth protecting. She and Kiba had developed, through the specific mechanism of both of them finding themselves in the same clearing at the same time with nothing operational requiring immediate attention, a sparring partnership that was less about combat training and more about the mutual recognition of two people who share a fundamental approach to moving through the world, and which was one of the more quietly significant friendships either of them had. Shizuru crossed on a schedule that was deliberate and consistent. Twice a month at minimum. The corridor conversation and its deferred completion had become a set of ongoing conversations that occupied the specific time and space that she had waited for and that were, in the proceeding of them, exactly what she had said she wanted, the full shape of something, known properly over time, with the weight it deserved. On both sides of the bridge, in the weeks after the opening, things were built. Not dramatically. Not with announcements or ceremonies or any of the external apparatus of significant events. In the ordinary way of genuine things, through the accumulation of days that each added something small and the small additions were real and the real things compounded. Chapter 52, What Drake Said at the End. 3 months after the opening, on an unremarkable Tuesday evening in the specific gold of autumn in Kuoh, Issei was sitting on the rooftop again, not waiting for a rift. Not monitoring a dimensional anomaly. Simply sitting on the rooftop in the way that he sat on it now, which was the way you sit in places that have become significant through the things that happened in them, with the full awareness of what they hold. The town below was doing its Tuesday business with complete equanimity. Drake was present and quiet in the background of the boosted gear, the comfortable quiet of something settled in the way that very old things settle when they have been in motion for a long time and have reached a particular kind of rest. Boy, Drake said. Yes. I have been the boosted gear for a very long time, the dragon said. Longer than your world's recorded history. Longer than the concept of history in either of the two worlds the bridge now connects. I know, Issei said. In that time, Drake said, I have had 13 bearers. Some were significant in the ways that the supernatural hierarchy measures significance. Wars won. Rivals defeated. Legacies established that persisted for generations. I have heard about some of them, Issei said. You have, the dragon agreed. But none of them, Drake said, and the quality of the dragon's voice was something that Issei had not heard in 2 years of their partnership, not satisfaction and not pride and not the particular ancient amusement that was Drake's most characteristic mode, but something that was simply honest, built something that connected two worlds. None of them found, in the same 4 days, 3 people who would carry what those 4 days built for 85 days across a dimensional barrier, and then build the infrastructure to make the barrier unnecessary. Issei was quiet for a moment. You are being sentimental, he said. I am being accurate, Drake said. There is a difference. You keep telling me that. Because you keep confusing the two. Issei looked at the town below. Somewhere in it, Rias was doing the evening work of a household head with the competence and care that characterized everything she did. Somewhere in it, Asia was probably making dinner for people who had not asked but who would receive it with the gratitude it deserved. Kaneko was probably already eating something. Kiba was probably training, and through the bridge that held its quiet resonance in the forest clearing 3 kilometers away, in another world, Shizuru was probably reviewing operational reports with the meticulous thoroughness of a unit commander who does not leave things to assumption. Rinko was probably in terrain of some kind, moving through it with complete presence. Mizuki was probably at a screen with something interesting on it, and a cup of tea that had gone cold because she had forgotten to drink it. Drake, he said. Yes. Thank you. For all of it. For the navigation in the cave. For the calibration on the crossing infrastructure. For the 18 days of resonance maintenance that you sustained alongside mine. For knowing the difference between perfect and adequate and refusing to accept the latter. A pause. You are being sentimental, the dragon said. I am being accurate, Issei said. Another pause. Longer. Yes, Drake said finally, with the quality of something ancient accepting something genuine. You are. The rooftop was warm and the light was gold, and the town below was doing its equanimous Tuesday business, and the bridge in the clearing was holding its resonance, and everything that had been built over the course of a rift, and a forest, and a crisis, and 85 days and 3 months of careful, ongoing work was present in the air the way important things are present when they are real, not loudly, not conspicuously, but completely. Issei Hyoudou sat on the rooftop where everything had changed and held the shape of what had been built, and did not try to make it smaller or larger than it was. It was the right size. It was still growing, and the bridge between worlds held its quiet resonance in the forest clearing, and the morning light of 2 universes came through it simultaneously every day, and the people on both sides of it were, in the specific and ongoing way of genuine things, exactly where they were supposed to be. Epilogue. The forest clearing changed with the seasons. This was something that neither Valerio nor Mizuki had fully accounted for in the dimensional modeling, not because they had missed it but because it was the kind of thing that only becomes apparent when you are present across multiple seasons rather than at a single point in time. The natural resonance of the crossing point did not change with the seasons, but the quality of the light that came through it did, and the specific atmospheric composition on either side did, and the result was that the crossing, in different seasons, was a slightly different experience from different angles. Mizuki had, of course, begun documenting this systematically the moment she noticed it. The documentation was on her tablet and in her notes, and in the ongoing record she maintained of the bridge's operational characteristics, and it was also, she had told Issei once on an autumn evening in the club room, in a separate document that was not a technical record but was a record of what the different seasons felt like from the threshold of the bridge. In the specific way that she recorded things that she had decided mattered. The forest clearing in winter held the crossing infrastructure under the particular stillness of snow-weighted branches, and the resonance in winter was quieter than in other seasons, as if the cold had given it a different quality of patience. Shizuru, crossing in winter for the first time, had stood at the threshold for a full minute looking at the winter version of the forest before stepping through, and when she stepped through her expression had the quality she carried when she was in the presence of something that had confirmed something she already knew. The clearing in spring was the version of itself that felt most consistent with what it had been on the opening day, the morning light at a similar angle, the air carrying the specific quality of things beginning. Rinko, crossing in spring, had walked directly through without pausing, which was characteristic, and had said on the other side, that spring was the season most like the night they had met, which was not an obvious observation but which was, when Issei thought about it, precisely accurate. The clearing in summer was the most different, the growth heaviest, and the light greenest and the air warmest, and the crossing in summer had a quality that was almost lush compared to the other seasons. Mizuki had noted in her documentation that summer crossings produced the most distinct light differential between the 2 worlds, and that this was, technically speaking, the most visually striking crossing condition, and that it was also, not technically speaking, her personal preference. And the clearing in autumn, which was the season in which the bridge had opened and in which Issei sat on his rooftop with the gold light and the quiet dragon and the 2 worlds connected by the structure in the forest below, was the season that felt most like the full shape of everything, not because it was the most dramatic or the most beautiful but because it held all the other seasons in its palette. The remnants of summer in the warmth of the light, and the anticipation of winter in the cooling air and the specific quality of fullness that things have when they have completed a cycle and are about to begin another. The bridge between worlds held its resonance in every season, and the people on both sides of it continued the ongoing work of knowing each other properly over time, with the full weight and the full care that genuine things deserve, across the distance that was no longer a distance that commitment could not close.